A couple of days ago, when we were talking about the Tennessee Vols, there were some Volunteers fans that were talking really spicy in the comment section, saying that the Vols could beat Georgia this year and win the SEC East. So our guy Kelly McClendon 6601 says Tennessee will totally demolish Georgia. Those are some really spicy words. Some really spicy words coming from Vols fans, man. And there was another Vols fan that gave us the blessing of typing us a bibliography of why Tennessee is going to be able to overtake Georgia for the SEC East this year. So go ahead, get you something to drink, get you something to eat while we read this long essay for why Tennessee's going to overtake Georgia. So shout out to my guy G White 7136. He says UGA does not have a high. He says UGA does not have an offensive system. It will be all new. And bro, look how easily the 14th ranked passing offense of OSU lit them up. This was a team that Michigan blew out and Penn State nearly beat. Respect to UGA, but 4-point wins over Mizzou, 10-point wins over UK, Kent State on UGA in Athens, UGA 100 yards rushing against Sanford. That was the 75th ranked strength of schedule in the regular season. And all but one common foe with UGA, Tennessee performed better than UGA. UGA, not a single point offensively against the 21 Clemson team. A team that didn't even win this conference compared to what Tennessee did to a better Clemson team in 22. I think UGA is a benefactor of being the deepest team after coming out of a pandemic that saw most every other team lose more players with opt-outs compared to UGA. And with all those other breaks in luck, they are a good team. But statistically, they don't match up offensively with the winner of the last 10 naughty winners before them. Mike Bobo and Beck versus Munkin and Stetson Bennett. I think UGA in the football world is about to be shocked at the drop-off at UGA without Stetson Bennett. No elite QB and 3 offensive players drafted in the 24 draft over the last 2 drafts that weren't tackles. If UGA played Tennessee at a neutral site and earlier, they would have lost, in my opinion. And LSU and Bama could have beaten them as well. You think UGA could have put 52 on Bama? That is the most any team in 114 years ever put on the Saban team. Bama's D was ranked higher than UGA's going into that Tennessee game. I think Tennessee G tried really, really hard against Georgia. LOL. Great stuff, man. Love your show and look forward to more content. So I had a hard time reading that bibliography, but shout out to my guy for typing that in. But let's just be honest, man. Georgia is probably going to beat Tennessee this year. And I love Tennessee, but Tennessee isn't where they need to be able to beat Georgia in terms of what they have up front. And even though Tennessee does have a really good offensive line, their defensive line should be pretty good this year. Georgia's defensive line is on a different level. I don't think no team in college football right now has the kind of talent that Georgia has up front. Georgia doesn't have football players on the offensive line and the defensive line, people. They have X-Men. They have mutants on the offensive line. Where do you find Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis at? Where do you find 300 plus D tackles that can run a 4.8 or faster? I don't think that when you look at Tennessee right now, they have the big boys up front to be able to slow down Georgia in the trenches. When you look at Tennessee, you saw how last year's game went. They got body bagged. They were not able to give Hendon Hooker any time to throw. They were throwing around Hendon Hooker like he was a rag doll. I don't think that Tennessee is going to be able to beat Georgia this year, although they are playing Georgia at home this year versus having to go on the roads and play them at Athens. That's a whole different animal. And I do think that Tennessee will be able to give Georgia a pretty tough game, but I don't think that Tennessee going into this year has enough horsepower to be able to stop the behemoth that is Georgia. Now, they could keep it close, and I do think that this year's game will be a lot closer than what it was last year, but I think that Tennessee realistically is at least 1 or 2 more years behind catching up to Georgia. I don't think that Tennessee is going to be able to win the SEC East over Georgia this year. And I get the whole schedule argument, but let's not act like Georgia played nobodies all last season. Didn't they blow out Oregon? Every time Georgia played a good team, they took them to the woodshed outside of playing Ohio State. And that Ohio State game was the best team that they played all season. When you were looking at that game on paper, Ohio State realistically was going to be the only team that was going to be able to have a shot at giving Georgia some problems on defense. Georgia had the best secondary in college football last year. You know who had the best receiving core in college football last year? Ohio State, led by that man, Sir Timothy Marvin Harrison Jr. Then you had Emeka Ibuka, Julian Fleming. You had C.J. Stroud, who was the second pick of this past year's NFL draft. Like, when you look at quarterbacks who have had good games against Kirby Smart's defenses, all of them have had great receivers around them and good offensive line play, and that's what Ohio State had. That's why Ohio State was able to challenge Georgia and then nearly beat them. But he also kind of left out how they dragged Tennessee. Like, he just kind of scoffed over it. But, I mean, they dragged Tennessee through the mud. And I don't think that Tennessee had an out-of-conference opponent last year that was as good as what Oregon was. I think their best out-of-conference opponent was who? Pitt? Which, respect to Pitt, but Pitt was nowhere as good as what Oregon was. Like, it's crazy how people like to criticize Georgia's schedule last year like they didn't blow out Oregon in their first game of the regular season. And then they destroyed TCU in the national championship. I mean, like, he made some okay points, but, you know, love to him, but I don't think Tennessee right now is going to be able to beat Georgia this year. I just don't think they have enough. I do think they can keep it close with them playing at home, but I just think that the SEC East is Georgia's to lose for the foreseeable future.